Hello everybody and welcome. The purpose of this webinar is to provide information and guidance for ship owners, operators, recognized organizations, and masters on the requirements of the Hong Kong Convention, as well as related requirements of the EU Ship Recycling Regulation, the EU SRR. To give you a little background into the Hong Kong Convention and the EU SRR, the Hong Kong Convention was adopted in 2009 to effectively address, in a legally binding instrument, the environmental, occupational health and safety risks related to ship recycling, taking into account the particular characteristics of maritime transport and the need to secure the smooth withdrawal of ships that have reached the end of their operating lives. On 22nd October 2013, the European Parliament formally adopted the EU SRR, which entered into force on 30th December 2020, with an aim to constitute an early ratification of the Hong Kong Convention. The EU SRR is nearly aligned with the Hong Kong Convention. On 26 June 2023, Liberia reached a milestone wherein Liberia ratified the Hong Kong Convention, thereby fulfilling the criteria for entry into force of the Convention 2 years later, and that will be 26 June 2025. Upon entry into force, the Hong Kong Convention will require new ships and existing ships of 500 gross tons and above registered with Liberia to have on board a valid international certificate on inventory of hazardous materials, the IHM Part 1, no later than 26 June 2025, or before going for recycling if this is earlier. Ship owners with ships of 500 gross tons and above calling at EU ports are required to develop the IHM prior to arrival at any EU port. The objective of the IHM is to document ship-specific information on the actual hazardous materials present on board in order to protect the health and safety of the crew on board the ship and to protect the health and safety of workers at ship recycling facilities and avoid environmental pollution when the ship is going for recycling. The IHM Part 1 shall remain with the vessel throughout its operational life and be updated as all new installations enter the ship. The IMO guidelines for the development of the IHM and Resolution MEPC 379/80 was recently revised to incorporate sibutrin contained in anti-fouling systems. What are the surveys that are required to be carried out under the Hong Kong Convention? An initial survey is required before the international certificate on IHM is issued to verify that the IHM Part 1 identifies hazardous materials, their location and approximate quantities, by checking supporting information and the location is consistent with the arrangements, structure and equipment of the ship through onboard visual inspection. A renewal survey is required to be carried out at intervals not exceeding 5 years. This survey shall verify that Part 1 of the Inventory of Hazardous Materials complies with the requirements of this convention. An additional survey, at the request of the ship owner, after change, replacement or significant repair of the structure, equipment, systems, fittings, arrangements and material which have an impact on the IHM. And a final survey is required to be conducted before a ship is taken out of service and before the recycling of the ship has started. This final survey shall verify that the inventory, in addition to the properly maintained and updated Part 1, incorporates Part 2 for operationally generated waste and Part 3 for stores. It shall also verify that the ship recycling plan, as required by Regulation 9 of the Hong Kong Convention, properly reflects the information contained in the inventory of hazardous materials and contains information concerning the establishment, maintenance, and monitoring of safe for entry and safe for hot work conditions, and the ship recycling facility where the ship is to be recycled holds a valid authorization in accordance with this convention. What are the certificates required under the Hong Kong Convention? Authorized recognized organizations shall issue an interim international certificate on IHM for a period of 5 months after successful completion of an initial, additional, or renewal survey, the interim international certificate on IHM along with the survey report and IHM Part 1 shall be submitted to the administration for issuance of the full-term international certificate on IHM. Statements of compliance on IHM already issued by authorized recognized organizations will continue to remain valid until they are renewed or until 26th of June 2025 if this is earlier, after which the Liberian administration will issue the international certificate on IHM with the same validity, which may not require an additional shipboard inspection or survey, provided the IHM has been maintained and updated as required. For ships calling at ports around the world other than EU ports, ship owners are required to develop the IHM Part 1 and obtain the international certificate on IHM prior to entry into force of the Hong Kong Convention on 26 June 2025 or before going for recycling if this is earlier. Ship owners recycling their ships prior to entry into force on 26 June 2025 are urged to carry out the final survey for issuance of the International Ready for Recycling Certificate, the IRRC. Authorized recognized organizations shall issue an interim IRRC after successful completion of the final survey described earlier, taking into account the authorization of the ship recycling facility in accordance with MEPC Resolution 21163, the interim International Ready for Recycling Certificate, the recycling plan, and the authorization of the ship recycling facility shall be submitted to the administration for issuance of the full-term IRRC. Thank you all for joining this webinar, and if you have any questions, you may direct them to this office at the email address regsandstandards@liscar.com. You may also review the marine advisory that was recently issued, advisory number 06 of 2023, for any additional information that you may need on the inventory of hazardous materials and on the Hong Kong Convention in general. Thank you again.